Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 218, Lewis versus Spivak, also known as UFC Vegas 68. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well.
Are you though? Because you're gonna have some tough, pronouncing names and stuff. Like I have it easy, man. I just copy what you say.
Yeah, I'm up to the challenge. As Keith is alluding to, this is a bit of a unique card. I mean, on the face of it, it looks like one of the weirdest, lowest stakes cards with fewer familiar names on it than just about any card in UFC history, unless you've been following the Road to UFC reality series, because UFC Vegas 68 doubles as the finale of that season, and that, of course, took place in Asia, and that's reflected in the makeup of this card. This is a 12-fight card, 24 fighters. There were only 3 Americans on this entire card, and they're all on the main card.
Yeah. I didn't follow the Road to the UFC reality whatever it was, but I'll say this: I would watch like 50 seasons straight of that without going to bed than I would watch one slap championship. What the hell that stupid thing's called?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I am very, very happy that we will not be providing any coverage to that farce at all. Like yeah, good.
But shout out to you, man. You got a tough job this week. I know you're the best in the biz for a reason. I don't even like ordering like Chinese or Korean food. Like I beg my wife to do it for me because like I'm so nervous that I'll mess up lo mein and chow mein and I'll order the same. Let me tell you a story real quick.
All right.
Sorry for all the people who want just MMA. I haven't done this in a while. We used to order from this one. Again, I'm not trying to be racist. I'm not sure if it was Chinese or I'm pretty sure it's Chinese food, but it could be Korean. I apologize. But we'd order from the same place. And one time the guy was like, what name for the order? And I'm like, it's Keith. And he's like, oh, Keith. Oh, my friend, come now. And I was like, that's when I knew I was officially fat. Like the Chinese food guy like knows me by name. And I never ordered from that place again. Never. No, I'm dead serious. I've never ordered from that place again after he said, "Oh, Keith, come now." And I mean, I just started ordering from another place. Like I didn't say like, "Oh, I'm gonna get healthy now." But, I just go to the place that has not as good, customer service.
Yeah,
doesn't cherish their customers as much.
Keith doesn't want to like burn all of his regulars. He's going through them one at a time until they start to recognize them.
The worst is when I get super fat and I want a pizza like 2 days a week. But I like tell my wife, like I can't order from that place. Yeah, but that's your favorite. Yeah, but I already did this week. Like they keep it track of me. Like there's a chart. Like,
well, I mean, any of those places, they've always got that place behind the counter where they got like the pictures of people that like write bad checks and like don't take a check from this guy. Then they got the wall of fame somewhere with Keith's face on it. Like, be extra nice to this guy.
Yeah, you wonder why I can't make 155 anymore.
No.
A lot closer to 255.
Oh man, I wrestled at 152 in high school. That's a long time ago. Anyway, this card, 12 fights, 24 fighters, only 3 Americans on the whole card, 4 Japanese fighters, 7 Koreans. That might be a record, even including cards that actually took place in Korea. And by way of that, pre-COVID, this is the kind of card the UFC absolutely would have dropped in Korea, or at least in Macau or Singapore or someplace in Asia where they, wanted to deliver a fight night. But as it is, this one's taking place at the Apex in the middle of the night. So watch out for probably me to be flying solo or roping one of our Europe correspondents into doing the post show with me.
I love that you just said naming all these Asian cities. I'm so glad that you're the host of the show, because I would have been like, those Asian cities like China City.
Oh my goodness. We have a couple of actual prelims. Got one of the more intriguing, or at least more exciting prospects in the UFC, Tatsuro, Taira in the curtain jerker. Then at the top, we have an actual main card, which it's a little lacking. I'll say the main card is a little lacking. Like Duho Choi versus Kyle Nelson is one of the rougher things the UFC's put on the main card in a long time. But right in the middle are those 4 Road to UFC finals. Just 125, 135, 145, and 155.
Hold on a second. Did you just bash Duho Choi, UFC Hall of Famer Duho Choi?
Duho Choi is
let's get a poll. Worst Hall of Famer, Duho Choi or Scott Rowland? All right, carry on.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, Duho Choi has as many professional MMA wins in the last 4 years as Charles Mask Lewis. So
yeah. I was you're not getting my vote for Hall of Fame. They mentioned Scott Rowland, and I didn't remember what team he played for. like Phillies? I think he played for the Phillies, right? I wasn't sure.
But we'll talk about those fights individually when we get to them. But just speaking of the general temperature of the first season of Road to UFC, of those 8 fighters, if you had to place a guess, how many of them 2 years from now are going to turn out to have been UFC material? I mean, assuming only 4 of them even make it to the UFC, probably only the winners make it. But
yeah, that's a good question.
Will any of these people be left in the UFC in 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think there's some pretty good prospects.
I'm glad you think so. Good. I mean,
guys I didn't really know about. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I'm, the Mel Kiper of the Asian scene, but yeah, there was some guys that watching some of the tape. Like, I was like, wow, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, there's one in particular that they're still pretty green, but I think they might actually make a decent splash. But again, we'll get to those when we get to them. Do you want to just dive straight?
You don't want to just go like how we do it on the preview show, just like put them in their weight class and how far up the rankings are going to go.
That would certainly age well. Somebody would have to like bring that back and visit it upon us in a year or two.
Some of our ones may not have aged as well.
First fight out of the gate at UFC Vegas 68 is a men's flyweight matchup between Tatsuro Taira and Jesus Aguilar. 2 gentlemen who between them have won 20 straight fights. Taira, the undefeated Japanese prospect, is a perfect 12-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He's a perfect 2-0 since joining the UFC last year. He fought most recently last October at UFC Fight Night Grasso versus Araujo, where he tapped out CJ Vergara in the second round with an armbar. So he's going to look to maintain his status as one of the hottest young prospects in the UFC, keep his undefeated record intact at the expense of Aguilar. The 26-year-old Mexican is 8-1 in his mixed martial arts career, and he has won 8 in a row since losing his professional debut. He will be debuting in the UFC, having won his way into the UFC on the Contender Series last August, where he choked out Erison Ferreira in the 3rd round of a pretty wild fight. Coming in here, I'm going to go out on a limb, even though this is just January, and say that this is the widest line you will see all year in the UFC in a short notice fight. Right now, Tatsuro Taira is minus 1,100. Jesus Aguilar around plus 700, plus 750 a few places. And you can get that's a decent line for Taira. He's he's minus 1,250 on one book. It's rough. And the thing is, I get it. You and I will always go on about how having the 0 in your loss column will get you overrated. People don't have the imagination to picture something happening until they've seen it. So until you've seen the guy beaten, you can't picture what it looks like. I get that. But you know what? Aguilar, even leaving aside the difference in skill and athleticism and just that Taira is a much better fighter, stylistically, this is a rough look for Aguilar. Because here's the thing. These guys are both submission specialists. Like, Taira is a sensational grappler. Aguilar, very opportunistic grappler. He's a finisher. I mean, he's got 8 wins. 6 of them are submissions. But Keith, you're old enough in the game to remember back in the early 2000s when the idea was, and you would hear experts say this, like, Mexico's never going to get into MMA because they have this machismo thing. They love boxers, but they don't want to see guys rolling around on the floor. And that turned out to be bullshit. But Jesus Aguilar is almost, he's what they must have pictured when they were saying that, because he's a submission specialist, but you don't see the guy shoot takedowns. He wants to get in a wild brawl and then just end up on the ground and be like, well, we were down there anyway, so I choked him out, That's not going to work against Tatsuro Taira, because Taira is, he's a beautiful grappler, but he's also a very sharp striker whose only problem right now, I think, is lack of confidence in his stand-up. Like, I think as he builds more confidence in his stand-up and just starts to throw more volume, starts to push the issue more, he's a more well-rounded fighter than he lets on right now in terms of his skill set. So if Aguilar wants to push a wild brawl on him, there's nothing that's indicated to me that he's going to catch Taira with something that hurts him really bad and turns the fight. And if it does end up in a collision and a scramble of the kind that Aguilar likes to happen, that's going to favor Taira as well. So this is just a rough look for Jesus Aguilar. I think he might actually have some staying power in the men's flyweight division, but I think Taira is a future top 10 guy, and I think it's near future. I think we're going to be talking about Taira as a ranked fighter by the end of this year. This is going to be, he's going to style on Aguilar. Give me Taira not to get drawn into the kind of madness that Aguilar is going to want. Probably just tag him up a little bit in the first round, and Taira will take this thing to the ground on purpose and probably choke Aguilar out late in the first round.
Yeah, when you were talking about this, the winning streaks they're on, I think about, like, you put on ESPN the first week of NCAA football, and it's like Alabama taking on like South Dakota Tech, and it's like these two teams combined to win their last 8 bowl games, and they're like, yeah, but Alabama was national championships, and the other guys in 1AA winning the the Hanes underwear,
the American Standard Toilet Bowl. Yeah.
Isn't it like the first one I want to start with my prediction and then talk about the fighters? Like Taira's gonna smash him.
Yeah.
Taira's, he's very well rounded. He's huge for the weight class. You talk about his striking. I agree with you. I think his striking is very good. We saw a lot of flash of that in his last fight. He's a long distance fighter, very fluid, very controlled, long range strikes, quick hands. He's got some stinging power, really good kicking game, tons of kicks. He can throw some naked leg kicks, so he can get caught with that. And he keeps his chin a little high for my liking, but some of that has to do with being so tall. But he's a decent wrestler, and he's an absolute ace on the ground. Smother and top control, very patient, like slowly works, transitions so well from position to position, great back takes, great submission skills. He's got 6 subs in his record. He subbed CJ Vergara in his last fight. He almost subbed Carlos Candelario, put him in like a gauntlet of submissions in their fight. You move to Aguilar. Aguilar's like the complete opposite. He's a short, stocky guy. He fights a lot of pressure, high output, as you mentioned. There's a lot of like power shots, just very wild. I was watching one of his fights. He was almost knocking himself over while he was throwing. So like he looked like a drunk guy fighting a little bit. He's very hittable. He is a good wrestler. He's got some pretty fast entries, but like he'll dive without any setup. He'll look. He will look for throws, but like I think it was the Contender Series. He went for throw and he just like didn't have the right posture, didn't go for the right leg. Like, everything was wrong. It was like no technique. He finds himself on bottom. He did it like a couple times. If he's on top, busy ground and pound, but he does need to improve his top game. It's like the guillotine is like a specialty for him, where he has all these subs by guillotine. He has like 4 submissions by guillotine, and he ever got a guillotine on the Contender Series. But he's a weak defensive wrestler, so that's like the only his only avenue to victory: catch a guillotine or land a big haymaker. This is a mismatch. Taira is miles ahead of him. I think he's miles ahead of him everywhere. I think he picks apart from range until he decides, there's an opening, or Aguilar makes a mistake and dives in for a takedown that isn't there, and Taira just subs him. So I'm with you, man. I'm going with Taira first round submission.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 218 is a middleweight matchup between Jeong Yeong Park and Denis Tiuliulin. Park, the 31-year-old Korean, is 15-5 overall. He's 5-2 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win streak, those being a split decision over Eric Anders last May, and then a second-round submission of Joseph Holmes last October at UFC Fight Night Cater versus Allen. He'll look to make it 3 in a row against Tiuliulin. The 34-year-old Russian is 10-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC last year. He made his debut, got choked out in the second round by Alyashkov Kizriev, came back in September and knocked out Jamie Pickett in the second round at UFC 279. Odds on this one favor Park pretty heavily. He's minus 200 or so. Tiuliulin plus 170. Keith, I mean, this would have been a more exciting and less predictable fight maybe 2 years ago, but Jeong Yeong Park has like transformed from our very eyes from kind of a stereotypical aggressive Korean brawler, and he's almost accidentally discovered that he's a very good wrestler.
Yeah.
And being a very good wrestler is poison for Denis Tiuliulin because, I mean, Tiuliulin, him sticking in the UFC or no is going to depend a lot on matchmaking. If they match him right, he's an exciting kickboxer with decent power, still has defensive holes. So, I mean, he's not going to scare your top kickboxers, you know, the guys in the top 10, but he could stick around, pick up a few bonuses, but takedown defense remains a liability for him. And he doesn't really help himself. Like he kicks a lot still, doesn't have the footwork to kind of keep his hips away from people that want to get him down. So if Park tries to make this exciting, you know, like the Jamie Pickett fight was wilder than it needed to be. We could have some fun times. Maybe Tiuliulin could hurt Park, but Park has proven to be extremely durable. I mean, I'm leaning towards Park getting Tiuliulin down and just mashing him down there, maybe getting a submission or a ground and pound stoppage. I mean, give me Park by third round TKO on the ground, but you know, I expect Park will have won all of the rounds handily right up until the time he finishes it. This is a bad matchup for Tiuliulin.
Yeah, it's this is in like this is the second fight of the card, but it also could be the co-main event. Like that's how this whole card is.
Oh, completely.
Park, yeah, a lot of things you said about Park, I kind of agree with. He's a guy that he's just a very underrated guy. On the feet, he's a counter striker. I think he does best in that like mid range. Instead of pressing back, he does better when he's kind of like slowly marching forward. He makes some defensive holes I don't like. He'll back straight up to the fence instead of like sidestepping. But when he gets in the pocket, like he's decent in that. He throws a lot of combinations. He's pretty decent at picking up his opponent's timing. He throws some hard calf kicks. I mean, he's a thick, like really thick guy too. Mm-hmm. So like they're like thudding. And you mentioned he's a very underrated grappler. I mean, I said this last time. He put on a wrestling clinic against Taefan Chukwi. Strong top position, good ground and pound. After making sure he's secured a position against Eric Anders, who's another guy he's known as a striker, but he's probably a better grappler. He showed some strong takedown defense in that. I like that he's adding submissions to his game now. He submitted Joseph Holmes in his last fight. He's got 4. I shouldn't say adding it, but like we're seeing it more in the UFC. He's got 4 subs on his record. Tiuliulin, I think you kind of landed it right on him too. He's a long, lengthy fighter, high volume on the feet, good striker, pressure striker, fast hands, busy jabs. Likes to be the one pressing the action. He's really good at sliding into the pocket and unloading hard shots. He doesn't mind a brawl. He can get a little wild and throw some haymakers. That definitely don't want to do against a guy like Park because Park can duck under one and take you down. I love that he's got a lot of power, so he can put you away. But I also love that he targets the body, understands that that's going to set up his power shots. I like his stepping knees, throw some hard kicks to the body, to the head. Works inside kicks, but we don't see that often anymore. His grappling, I think I'm a little higher on his grappling than you. I think he's a good offensive wrestler, and he actually can grapple a little bit. Like he advances position. But he's not a submission threat at all. He's been submitted in the past. And you mentioned he struggles on his back. You take him down, you can hold him down. So I actually think this, because of the way Park fought in his last fight, that this could be a closer fight. But I also think both guys are underrated. I like Tiuliulin's skill set, especially on the feet. But Park, he's just a gamer. He's a guy that finds ways to win, and even though he's not this great athlete, I think we'd have some back and forth contests. I did want to take Tiuliulin based on like his pressure and his overall striking skills. But until he shows me he can stop takedowns, I'm going to go the same way. I'm going to go Park. I'll say split decision. I'll say it's a close one.
All right, there we go. 2 picks for Jeong Yeong Park to get it done with varying degrees of lopsidedness. We head now to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Ji-yeon Kim and Mandy Bohm. And the nicest way I can put it is that these are 2 women badly in need of a win. So hopefully at least one of them gets it. Kim, the 33-year-old Korean, is 9-6-2 overall. She is 3-6 in the UFC, and she is on a 4-fight losing streak. She has dropped fights dating all the way back to August 2022. Alexa Grasso, Molly McCann, Priscilla Cachoeira, and most recently, last July at UFC 277, Jocelyn Edwards, to whom she dropped a split decision in their matchup, which was actually at bantamweight. She's back in the flyweight division here, looking to snap that 4-fight losing streak against Bohm. The 33-year-old German, who goes by Monster, is 7-2 with 1 no contest overall. She's 0-2 since joining the UFC late in 2021. She dropped her debut to Ariane Lipski in September of 2021, came back last July and dropped another decision, this time to Victoria Leonardo. That was at UFC Fight Night Blades versus Aspinall last July. So she'll be looking for her first UFC win. She is decidedly not favored to do so. Right now, Kim is -280, Bohm +210. For those of you who are enjoying this podcast via Apple Music or Spotify or your favorite streaming platform, you didn't see the face Keith just made there. Keith, I'm going to toss this to you, but I mean, this is about as low level as it gets.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, who the hell's putting Kim at 3-1 favorite? Like, what? I'm not saying that she shouldn't be the favorite, but your stats were, what would you say? Like 3 out of 9, 3-6 in the UFC.
She's 3-6 in the UFC. She hasn't won in the UFC in almost 3.5 years. And the people she's beaten in the UFC are all gone. Nadia Kassem, Melinda Fabian, Justine Kish.
Yeah, one thing I will say that some of the names that she lost to were pretty decent losses. Like you mentioned, Alexa Grasso and Priscilla Cachoeira. Like those are decent losses. I give her a pass on that. I thought this was going to be pretty much a pick 'em because these are really low level UFC talents. I'll start with Kim. I mean, she's a poor athlete, very flat footed. Her hands are kind of slow, not very technically defensively. She keeps her chin high in the air. She gets hit a lot. She doesn't have like good head movement to get really inside. Her last fight, she was against Jocelyn Edwards, and again, that's not a fair comparison because she's such a different fighter than Mandy Bohm. But she really just going over a game. She struggled to get inside on Jocelyn. She really struggled with the length. She also had really uncharacteristic. I don't know the word I'm trying to use. I can't even say it. She, unlike herself, she had really low volume in that fight against Edwards. She usually her thing is she wins with volume. She's usually has a busy jab. She's definitely a headhunter. We talked about this in the past. She hardly ever throws any kicks. Hardly ever goes to the body. She does like to follow, her shots. Follow her jab into the pocket and unload big shots. For a smaller fighter, I know she moved up in weight last fight, but she does have underrated pop. Like I think that's probably the best part of her game. And she's shown toughness. She's willing to eat a shot to kind of land some of her own. She can battle on the clinch a little bit, though I was surprised that Alexa Grasso, who's not really known for clinch fighting, beat her up there. She's a weak wrestler, like weak defensive wrestler. I go all the way back to the Antonina Shevchenko fight, like where Shevchenko was taking her down, which is never a good.
Making Antonina Shevchenko look like Tatiana Suarez out there.
Yeah, like that's never a good sign. Mandy Bohm.
Just cut. That's it. We're done. Mandy Bohm.
So I do like some things about her. She's got some good volume. I'd say she's some strong boxing, good hand speed, pretty accurate. She's likes to try to beat her opponent to the point of attack. Nice jab. But again, similar, like against Victoria Leonardo, she was seriously gun shy. which is not a good thing when you kind of need volume. You're not a big power puncher. She does have some defensive holes. She hangs her hands low. I don't trust her chin. She was dropped twice by Ariana Lipsky, who isn't really known for being a power puncher, and it's a loss that hasn't aged well at all. If she gets inside, she can grind a little bit, though she was out-muscled by Victoria Leonardo in her last fight. But Victoria Leonardo is like historically strong. That's her game.
Yeah.
There's not much on the ground. Like, I haven't seen that much from Bohm. She really just wants to stand on the feet. This fight stinks so bad that I did tape study for this fight earlier in the week, and I forgot about it. I'm not high on either fighter at all. The loser will likely be on the cut list.
Oh, dude. I mean, what's her name? Kim was on our cut list last time. She lost 4 in a row. And we were assuming she was gone. I guess she got a break because it was at bantamweight. But yeah. Yikes.
And they both looked really bad in the last fight. They both looked gun shy. I'm going with the pretty big underdog then. I'm taking Bohm. I actually think she's the more technically sound fighter. I don't think she has as many defensive holes. I say we have a back and forth boxing affair, and I think she wins it. Give me Bohm and I guess an upset.
Wow, Keith, picking the 2-1 underdog here in the. Well, I mean, it's high stakes for them. It's not real high stakes for the division as a whole, but I get that, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Bohm. I mean, I wouldn't be that surprised if Bohm pulls this out. Honestly, the thing that would surprise me most out of this fight is if it was really entertaining. Because on top of everything else, two women who just showed themselves to be really gun shy, as you mentioned in their last fight, could possibly add up to just a rough 15 minutes of viewing. I'm gonna go with Kim here at the underdog. I guess I'm a chicken, but Kim has at least shown that she can hang and be competitive with UFC level flyweights, and Bohm really has yet even to show that. I mean, you mentioned that the Lipsky loss hasn't aged well. That's Lipsky's only win in the UFC in like the last 3 years. When you're somebody's only win in the UFC in 3 years, yeah, that's the definition of not aging well. Yeah, give me Kim by decision here, just by, I guess, deciding to pull the trigger enough to pull out these rounds.
Yeah, so this fight reminds me of the other day I was at a softball lesson, my daughter's pitching lesson. She's a softball pitcher, and she, she's 13, so it is what it is. And she's a softball pitcher in Rhode Island, so like she's not Jenny Fitch. And this guy's talking to me, his daughter's like pitching, and he's telling me about her travel team and the C-level travel team, and what holes they have, but what improvements, and their rivalry with some other team, and breaking down and I'm sitting there just listening to the guy talking to him, but like trying to be nice. I'm just thinking like, dude, there's nothing in the world I care less about right now than like your daughter's team versus some other. Like, I don't care. And they were even younger. It was like the 10 years old. No, I don't think that. They should like 12 years old. So I'm like, that's how I feel about this fight. Like, I'm sure somebody out there is super important, like super into this fight, but this is your 12U Rhode Island C division, C level girl softball matchup.
I would like the people that really care about this fight. It's going to be teammates, friends, family, and bettors that see some kind of value.
Yeah. The bettors are always
Yeah. I mean, it's the reason that like fantasy football is the best thing that like ever happened to the NFL, because people even watch the shitty teams because they got the one tight end or the kicker or something. Yeah,
it's like why the red zone's popular, because like that you didn't give a shit like when they cut over to, all right, we're gonna go to Cleveland versus Houston. Like, no, you didn't give a shit. Like,
hey, why Houston?
Oh yeah, my bad. My bad.
No, we're terrible. All right.
Hey, my Patriots going in the wrong direction too. So.
We head now to the men's flyweight division for the first of the 4 Road to UFC finals at UFC Fight Night 218. This one is an all-Korean affair, as it is Seung Choi versus Hyun Park. Choi, the 26-year-old from Seoul, is 6-1 overall. He is on a 5-fight win streak, including his 2 wins on the road to UFC series last June and October. Both of those by decision. He will be facing Park, the 27-year-old, who is the perfect 7-0 in his mixed martial arts career so far. He won twice on the road to UFC series as well in June and October. His 2 wins were first-round finishes, a first-round knockout of Jeremiah Sirigar in June and a first-round submission of Tanwong Saklek Chutwatana. That would be a name from Thailand, and I probably butchered it, but I delivered it with confidence, and that's the best I can do. Odds here, not too surprisingly, favor the undefeated fighter who delivered finishes on the show. He is -195, Choi +165 on the comeback. Keith, I mean, you more or less confessed off the top. I am confessing as well. I did not follow the Road to UFC series in real time. I've sort of been cramming it over the past week. Like, luckily we had an extra week with, no UFC event that I could kind of ease into this. But I mean, give me your take on these fighters and who you think wins this one.
Yeah, I'm surprised you weren't taping it. Like, Game of Thrones comes out, and then hey, can't stop that right now because the road to UFC. What do they call it? The road to UFC. That what it was called?
Yeah, road to UFC.
Wasn't that like UFC 13 or something, or something? I don't know. Road to the heavyweight title. It was road. Yeah. I would rather break down TK versus Bastard right now than some of these fights.
Oh my goodness.
Let's do that. Just pretend like we don't know who's going to win that one.
Yeah.
All right. So Hunks and guys, I'm gonna tell you right now, if I butcher people's names, I'm sorry.
Park and Choi. That's all we got to call them.
Well, I was planning on doing like the Korean guy and the guy from India, and then it's like, oh wait, 2 Korean guys are going against each other. So that's not gonna work.
And half the people on this card are named Choi or Park.
Choi is Choi,
like we've got 2 Chois and 2 Parks on this card. Yeah.
Is Choi like the
Choi and Park are 2 very common names in Korea. Yes.
Choi is like the Smith of Korea or something, or Johnson.
Yep.
All right. So Park, the first thing that stands out with Park is, you mentioned, like, all wins by stoppage. He's got some professional kickboxing experience, though. In fairness, in his last fight, he was getting wrecked on the feet, and he was dropped. He was also moving straight back to avoid some strikes, which I don't like. Despite getting hurt, he does use pressure a lot. He throws a lot of combinations, straight punches on the pipe. Pretty nice right hand. He will wrestle, and he's definitely a submission threat. He got a quick submission in his last fight. He's got some submissions on his record. Move over to Choi. Choi's light on his feet. That's what stands out to me. He uses a lot of feints, cuts angles really well, quick hands, decent pop. He will throw some single strikes instead of combos, which I don't like. But I like that he's got good vision. He sees things coming at him. He's elusive. A lot of kicks, good calf kicks. He likes to wrestle, good reactionary double, body lock takedowns. He can be too aggressive sometimes, looking for the submission, which is ironic because he doesn't even have a single sub on his record. So when I was watching these guys, like, nothing really jumped out to me as like spectacular. And there wasn't much difference between these guys. Like, I feel like they match up pretty well. Like, they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
I flip-flopped a little bit, but I'm going to go with Park because, and again, like, there's a lot of tape studying. These ones brand new. So this is actually, I'd say, I'm going to say of all the fights in the card, but it's probably one of the ones these guys don't jump out as me as huge UFC talents like some of the other guys coming up. So I think that's might be why I didn't spend as much time. I flip-flopped a little bit. I'm going to go with Park because he showed me the ability to get stoppages on the feet and the ground. So that kind of stands out to me a little bit more. So I'll say he gets a submission in the second round. Yeah,
I can completely see that. And I'm glad you pointed out that in broad strokes, at least, they're pretty similar. And generally speaking, in a fight that looks sort of evenly matched, or a fight between 2 guys that are very much unknowns, I lean towards the more dynamic finisher. Just, in a fight or in a sport as chaotic as MMA, just that's one more thing in their pocket. But I've got this sneaking sense that Choi's going to be able to wrestle Park and that he'll be willing to do it. And I think that, I understand why Park is the favorite here, but I think because he's undefeated and because in the two highest visibility fights of his career, the ones on the road to UFC, he delivered like pretty impressive finishes. I think that line might be a little inflated. I feel as though this fight is almost dead even, and I'm going to lean towards Choi, the underdog here. I mean, if he gets lit up on the feet, or if he shoots for a bad takedown, because like he does sometimes like shoot from too far away and without setups. I mean, if he just dives right into a guillotine or gets pancaked and gets his back taken and gets choked out, I won't be surprised. But give me Choi to make it work. Win a decision over Park here in a somewhat substantial upset, and punch his own ticket to the UFC. And honestly, Park being the previously undefeated one, he'll probably find his way to the UFC this year as well. Next up, the bantamweights take the cage once again with a UFC contract in the balance. It is an All Japan matchup, as it is Toshiomi Kazama versus Rinya Nakamura. Kazama, the 25-year-old, is 10-2 overall. He won his last time out. It was in June, in his first and only road to UFC appearance. Basically, he won in his quarterfinal. Then he showed up for his semifinal in either September or October. His opponent missed weight, and the road to UFC thing was, if you miss weight, the other guy doesn't even have to fight. He gets a walkover like it's a high school wrestling tournament. So Kazama slides right in, but he slides right into a pretty difficult assignment in the form of Rinya Nakamura. Nakamura, the 27-year-old from Saitama, is a perfect 6-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He did have to win twice on the show, but no problem. Both of them first-round finishes. In June, he got a first-round submission on the ground over Gugun Guzman, then came back and beat Shohei Noze by ground and pound halfway through the first round. Nakamura, the biggest favorites among the road to UFC finals. He's minus 450, Kazama plus 325, and it makes all the sense in the world. By the eyeball test of how Nakamura has looked in Shudo and on the show, just complete dominance. And then because of his credentials, he's a decorated wrestler. He has some medals in, Asian events, but he's the type of wrestler where it has translated to MMA just fine. I think he's probably... he might be the best pure MMA wrestler to come out of Japan since like Masakatsu Ueda 15 years ago. And he has more kind of athleticism and explosion. Like Ueda was a technician who was like strong as an ox for what looked like kind of a skinny little guy. Nakamura's got that. Plus he's got some explosion. And yeah, for that reason, this is a bad matchup for Kazama. I think Kazama is actually a pretty fun fighter. And at just 25, his kind of combination of aggressive grappling, because he prefers to grapple as kind of a top position bully, and he's not going to be able to do that against Nakamura because he's going to get dumped. Kazama has some upside. He's a guy that if he finds his way to the UFC could make a splash in the 135-pound division, but if it all depends on getting past Nakamura, it ain't happening. Things I like about Nakamura are he has the full menu of ways to get it to the ground. He has a good single. He has a good double. He has good like.
So did Kasama's opponent had the full menu.
Apparently, yeah. He went to the all-you-can-eat sushi place and just like loaded up. Nakamura. He has like the kind of like body lock and inside trip you'll see from like Russian freestyle wrestlers. He's got all that, and it's great because it allows him to like finish the takedown and not just end up in full guard or half guard like you usually do when you just, shot a single or a double leg. But, he's good at landing in side control. He's good at like taking the back on the way down. He's done that throughout his career. And I think he's going to be able to do that to Kazama. Kazama's best chance here is to, slap on a triangle or something from the bottom. That's rough sledding against the guy that knows it's coming. Give me Nakamura here. I would love it if this thing went long enough that we could see if Nakamura has that sort of explosive wrestling in the third round of a fight, but I'm not sure we get it here. He's just shown great killer instincts on the ground. Give me Nakamura by, I'm going to say submission early in the second round, but after putting on a clinic in the first.
Yeah, while you're talking about that, I was thinking about this. I think it's fantastic, and I just miss his weight. The guy moves on. That could be a good idea for the second season. The UFC just brings back all people who've missed weight, and it's just like put them all. They don't fight each other. It's like the biggest loser for UFC fighters. Instead of like the road to the UFC, it's like the treadmill to the UFC, and it's like it's got Aspen Ladd and William Knight and just whoever can make the weight first. That's it. It's just a race to whoever can get on the scale in their signed contract.
Damir Ismagulov didn't really retire. He's already like taping that right now.
Yeah, he got a head start.
Duran Wynn is like headed there right now.
Oh God, yeah. Duran Wynn. No, like Duran Wynn just eats like John Lineker on the show. Like what happened to John Lineker? All right. We're talking about Rinya Nakamura versus Toshiomi Kazama.
Yes.
Nakamura, he's a really great athlete. Like that's the thing that stands out to me on the feet. Like you see all these crazy flying knees and stuff he throws out there. He's southpaw, some quick hands. He's shown some great power in his hands. He throws a lot of power shots. He really steps into them. He is open to leg kicks. I also don't like the way he reacts to getting hit. He kind of can overreact a little bit and then start throwing wildly. He's a really good dirty boxer, but the thing that concerns me most with him on the feet, and like again, he looks spectacular. I mean, an incredible knockout in his last fight, is that he can fall in love. Like he looks like a guy who's fallen in love with his hands, and that bothers me because as you talk about, he's an elite wrestler. I mean, you're talking about some of the tournaments he won. He won the U23 World Championship. That means that's you have to be under 23 years old in the world, and he won it. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, that's the same tournament that Bo Nickel won. I mean, this guy's wrestling.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, I got it in. He's got great hip control, great at winning scrambles, blazing fast entries, good top control. He does have a submission on his record, so I like that. Shows that he's kind of becoming more adequate in the MMA game on the ground. Kazama, he's only 25 years old, so I like that. He's a very physically strong guy. Like, he's very ripped up, extremely aggressive on the feet, really sits on his punches, throws hard shots. But all his striking are wide hooks, and he uses these to kind of close the distance, you said, where he's a big-time submission threat. He's got 5 subs. He has this judo background where he likes to get inside, nice upper body throws, trips, really good at winning scrambles. In his last fight, he was even pulling guard just to sweep, which shows a lot of confidence. He gets on top. Good. I like how he worked on top. He was lacing the legs, going with the Dagestani handcuff. And he showed good cardio. Like he was able to wrestle and scramble hard. I think this is the best fight on the entire card. I like both guys. I think both guys are UFC level talents. Nakamura needs more polish. You could see he's still kind of crazy out there and kind of still looks like he's learning himself. And I think Kazama is a tough opponent, but I'm with you. I think this is a bad stylistic matchup where one guy wants to get to the fight to the ground and the other guy is the much better wrestler. I would take elite wrestling over judo any day of the week and twice on Sunday. I think Nakamura stops Kazuma's entries. I think he catches him with a big shot on the feet. I see Nakamura wins by first round TKO.
The quartet of Road to UFC finals powers on, headed to the men's featherweight division for a matchup absolutely designed to trip my co-host Keith Schillen up as many times as possible, as it is Lee versus Yi. Jeong Yeong Lee of Korea versus Yi Zha of China.
Yeah, you're definitely the John Anik of it, where you have the pronunciation. And I'm with the DC where I forget people's names. I'm calling the wrong name. I'm trying to make jokes. I'm probably eating while we're taping.
As long as neither of us is buffer and just like pronouncing Americans' names wrong that you've been saying for 15 years, like the dude still can't say Derek Cleary.
It's like it's your only job.
Your only job is to pronounce shit right. Like
you have a week and you have to pronounce what 30 people's name.
Yeah.
And of those 30 people, you've already pronounced 26 of them already.
And some of them you've been saying for 15 years. Derek Cleary.
How does he say it?
Clearly.
Oh, Derek Clearly.
He says it Derek Clearly every time.
I have a coworker. Her name is, and I'm gonna mess it up. I call it Carrie, but her name is Carrie, like Carrie. I just call it Carrie, and like just deal with it.
Okay, but the thing is, those names are only even pronounced differently in the Northeast. Like if the word like Merry Christmas and marry a person, if you pronounce them differently, you're from the Northeast. Like a lot of parts of the country, those are pronounced exactly the same.
All right, so if I say I'm gonna marry my wife,
and I'm gonna wish Merry Christmas.
So you say, so the rest of the world says
in parts of the country
Christmas instead of Merry.
No, it's like Merry for both. I'm gonna marry my wife. I'm gonna say
Merry
Christmas.
Mother of Jesus.
Yeah.
So is that like one word in? No,
I mean they're two different words, but the vowel sound is the same in a lot of the United States.
What I'm saying is that like the one word in New England we actually pronounce correctly, and the rest of like pronounce wrong. How you like that? I park my car next to Mary. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. There you go.
Man, is that how bad we want to talk about this fight? All right. Jeong Yeong Lee, 27-year-old Korean, is 9-1 in his mixed martial arts career. He is on a 6-fight win streak, including both of his appearances on the road to UFC, both of which, I mean, this dude, there's not tape on this guy so much as GIFs. His quarterfinal appearance, he armbarred Xiaobin in 36 seconds. He came back in October and knocked out Kai Lu in 42 seconds. Luckily, he's the former Road FC featherweight champ, so there is a good amount of tape on the guy. But, I mean, we'll get to the actual analysis, but this dude, even by Korean standards, fights like he is double parked or like parked in the fire lane. He's going to face Yi. The 26-year-old Chinese fighter is 21-3 overall. He is a veteran of several Chinese promotions, primarily WLF, and he's on a 3-fight win streak, including his 2 appearances on the road to UFC, where he choked out Keikusei Sasu in June, came back in October for a semifinal, and took a split decision over Kiyomi Matsushima. Odds favor the Korean here pretty heavily. He's -250, Yi +210. And I, for one, get why that's the case. Frankly, part of this is a reflection on Chinese MMA right now, WLF in particular. WLF is like the Aspara FC of China, where the level of it's not like there aren't like thrown fights or fixed fights, but just the level of competition. If they tag you as a promising prospect, they will find like cans for you to crush, which is why
Chinese Jay Ellis is out there.
Exactly. I mean, at least Jay Ellis tries to win and is just very bad at it. But like,
no, Jay Ellis doesn't train.
No. Like
he's never been to MMA gym in his life.
No, why do that when you got like the bus stop? You know,
like he hits a puncher bag and yeah.
But when you see someone come over from Dagestan and they're going to debut in like a global promotion and they're like 17-2, you're like, oh, this dude kicks ass. Yeah, when somebody comes out of like WLF or Aspara FC and they're like 17-2, you're like, I gotta see the tape on this. I want to see him fight at least twice in the UFC before I can pass judgment. And that's absolutely the case for Yi. He's a guy that, I mean, kind of like his teammate, Zhu Rong, clearly came to the UFC having been able to get over on the regional level just on aggression and athleticism and just kind of like being a better fighter than like the guys they had him match up against. Whereas Jeong Yeong Lee, you can say the same thing about him, but it's against a higher level of competition. And this dude, I mean, we just talked 2 weeks ago about Terrence McKinney and how he kind of like just strikes by lightning, submission or knockout. He just has this penchant for getting people out of there in like under 2 minutes. that approach, I mean, he's going to run into a brick wall at some point. Nobody finishes everybody in 45 seconds forever. I've just asked Khamzat Chimaev. The question is what you do when you get to the point where you run into people that you can't just run through. We'll have that question to answer about Jeong Yeong Lee, but I don't think we're going to have it here. I think he's going to run right through Yizha. Yizha has two problems that present enormous opportunities for Lee. Yi's like takedown defense is not great, and he's been easy to hurt. Even in fights where he's squashing people, when people touch him, like he reacts and he gets shook up and he gets rocked. For someone like Lee, that's bad news. I'm going to say that Lee comes out, puts on the pressure, like probably uses feints to draw Yi out and just like catches him and crushes him with something in the first round. Give me Jeong Yeong Lee by knockout within the first half of the first round here.
Yeah, so I think out of every fight on the card, I think Yeong Lee is the one that I have the least notes on. And some of that, so I kind of give a background how I do it. I write down every single fighter on the card, write them all down. And then I kind of put check marks once I watch a fight of them. And I kind of go like, all right, who do I know the least about? I watch a fight of that guy. And then I go to the next guy. But my rule is I always try to watch the last fight they had. And then I go through I try to go through like the whole list of people before I watch 2 fights or 3 fights on one guy. Yeah, well, this guy's last fight's like 15 seconds. And then the fight before that was 30 seconds. The fight before that was 35 seconds. So he's exciting. I'll say that. He's short. He throws straight punches down the pipe. They're short shots. They're not much tells in them. He showed in his last fight that he's really good at picking up his opponent's time and really good at beating them at the point of contact. He has serious power in his hands. And then you look, he can get the fight to the ground, and he has these spectacular, like not just how he submits them, like the way he submits them. It's quick. It's very like a like Ronnie Yaya like style, like not slow, just jumping into things, or Charles Oliveira like jumping into things. Not your Damon Maya slowly working, or your Gelatin Almeidas. Zha Yi. One thing that stands out to me about him is just how experienced he is for someone making his UFC debut. He's a very physically strong guy. He's a pretty good athlete. He's elusive. He can fight at both stances. Defensively, he fights out of a high guard. Good output. Throws straight punches down the pipe. I like that he switches stances in the middle of the combinations, which kind of always changes the angles that things are coming. He hits hard. You mentioned he has some defensive holes. One thing is that he stands up too tall. He can back straight up. You mentioned he's been hurt. He can offensive wrestler. Like he gets inside, gets some body locks, some foot sweeps. He will shoot for a takedown. He is a serious submission. He's got 10 subs on his record. But he can lose position chasing a sub, and his defensive wrestling is weak. But he did show that he's hard to hold down. So I'm not nearly as confident as you is, because I think this is a tougher fight to pick. Some of that is because what you said about Lee, when you're starching guys so quickly and everything, you know, I want to see some adversity. I want to see when a guy's not getting starched. And I actually think Zha Yi is pretty well-rounded, and he's pretty fun too, but he can be sloppy. So I think we can have some fun exchanges on the feet and on the ground, but give me the guy that has shown time and time again, even against low competition, but he's shown time and time again that he can land one shot and fight, end the fight at any time. So while I actually think it's a harder fight to pick, I'm going the same way you are. I'm going to say Lee ends it early. I say he gets another first-round knockout.
Next up, we have the final of the finals of the first season of Road to UFC. It is Indonesia versus India, which I am absolutely sure is the first time that has ever happened in the UFC. And these names are going to knock me for a loop, but here they are. It is Indonesia's Jeka Asparido Saragih versus India's Anshul Jubli. Saragih, the 28-year-old Indonesian, is 13-2 overall. He's on a 5-fight winning streak, including his 2 appearances on Road to UFC. He won both by knockout, one back with a sensational spinning back fist back in June in his quarterfinal. Then in the semifinals, he one-shotted Won Bin Ki. He will be squaring off against Jubli. The undefeated 28-year-old Indian is 6-0 overall. He stepped straight into the semifinals in October, where he took a split decision over Kyung Pyo Kim. Odds here, pretty close. I believe this is the closest of the 4 road to UFC finals. Jubli just the slightest of favorites. He's minus 120. Saragih available plus 100. Even money as the slightest of underdogs. When I draw like generalizations about fighters from a certain country, like it's a cultural, not a racial thing. Like when I say Korean fighters in the mid 2000s were all psychotically aggressive, it's not because I think the Korean people are psychotically aggressive. That's just the kind of gyms they had and the kind of fight style they taught. You know, when I say every Dagestani fighter has a foreguard and wrestles bears, it's because that's the kind of haircuts and background they have.
Unless we say something negative about Canadians, because we hate Canadians.
Well, Canadians all have mullets and go to TriStar and then just become boring.
Just for the record, it's your first time ever listening. I'm joking about it. I'm actually married to a Canadian-born person, not like background, like she was born and raised in Canada.
Yeah.
So that was just a joke.
And here, I mean, this Anshul Jubli feels to me like very much like the type of fighters that are coming out of India right now, and mostly going to one championship. I mean, I don't think Anshul Jubli is the first Indian fighter or would be the first Indian fighter in the UFC, but he might be because no, he was from Pakistan. Like Arjun Buller, he was Pakistani by way of Canada. You know, Pakistan and India have been different countries since the 1960s. But
it shows you what I know. I'm like, oh, it must be Indian.
But at any rate, Jubli, I think his best quality is kind of his grindy wrestling and like top position grappling. You know, he claims Tiger Muay Thai. He's going to come out and stand like a Muay Thai fighter, but what he really wants is to take his man down and grind out a win. And that feels like a lot of the fighters that are coming out of India right now. And Saragih, Indonesia is virgin territory to MMA right now. I mean, we're talking about Indonesia is the 4th most populous country on the entire planet. It's like, you know, China, India, United States and Indonesia are like right there, coming up on like 300 million people. And I think this is going to be the first Indonesian fighter in the UFC. But the Indonesian fighters I've seen, in broad strokes, they remind me of the fighters that are coming out of the Philippines. Like a lot of Wushu Sanda type backgrounds, aggressive, varied strikers. And the question is always, how are they going to deal with it when they get to promotions where there are lots of people that, you know, want to take them down and want to grapple? That's the dynamic I see here. And that's why even though I think both these guys are pretty good fighters, I think the stylistic matchup does favor Jubli, because Jubli, I mean, he's a decent enough striker, but with his, you know, his entries, his physical strength, his persistence, I think he's purpose built to take down someone like Saragih, who has a kind of wide traditional stance, throws kicks and punches in combination well, but he throws a lot of kicks. I think Jubli's just going to have a pretty good time taking Saragih down. Give me Jubli to win a decision here, you know, and it'll be kind of disappointing if you were hoping to see, like, you know, crescent kicks to the liver and like and head kicks and wild stuff, because I think this is going to just become more or less a grindy wrestling thing.
Yeah, Jubli. Yeah, the thing that stands out to me about him is how big he is. Like, he's huge for the weight class. I'd say he's pretty technical on the feet, keeps everything tight, long strikes, straight shots down the pipe, nice check left hook. I do like the way he was continuing to wrap around his overhand right around his opponent's fight in his last fight. He was just like kind of hand fighting and then wrap around the right hand. he was throwing a lot of single strikes, which I don't like. I think if he picks up the volume a little bit, he'll be a little bit better. He works the body well. He's got some decent pop. Not one of these one and done type fighters. Like he's not gonna end one punch and end it, but he shows some stuff. He does telegraph his shots a little bit, loaded up, which I don't like. But I like that he cuts angles a lot when he bounces off the center line when he's striking. So, it's tough to counter, and it's also tough to, you kind of never really know where he's coming. He was really good at attacking, sliding away from the counter, and then re-attacking. So he kind of like being the first guy, like being first and third. He had that a lot, be first and third. I like his step and knees. A little bit of offensive wrestler. I didn't see as much is apparently you have, but I see some takedowns, which I do like. Weak defensive wrestler, though. Yeah. But I liked that he was really hard to hold down. And then another fight I was watching of him, he slowed down a little bit for my liking. I think some of that has to do because of – I'm assuming this is a guy who cuts a lot of weight because he was big.
Yeah, he's huge.
He might cut a lot of weight. Now, Saragih is the opposite. He's small for the weight class. And you mentioned that, like, the – Indonesian fighters and this style. And I'm not going to pretend like I have this huge idea how Indonesian fighters fight. But he looks like a guy who doesn't cut weight at all. Like he could drop a weight class. He fights behind a high guard. He does well to keep his chin. Never mind. Scratch that. Just he's a counter striker. He throws a lot of combinations, which I like. He's for a guy who's undersized. He's got some good power. I mean, he got an incredible knockout in his last fight. He does load up on his shots, but a lot of that has to do because he throws everything hard. I mentioned about somebody else on the card. He throws so hard, it's like he almost knocks himself over when he misses. Some hard body kicks. He is open to calf kicks, and that's because he stands up a little bit too tall. I haven't seen too much of his ground games on the offensive side, but he has 4 submission wins, so I gotta like that moving forward. I like Jubli here. I feel good about him. He's bigger. He's a more technically sound fighter, I think. Even though he's like bigger, he probably is not that hard a puncher, but I think he can use that his length on the feet, but also if he gets into like a grindy affair, if they get some clinch, I think he can use that there. I think he quickly sidesteps a lot of the wild strikes from Saragih. I agree with you that if he decides to wrestle, or if there's wrestling, I think he'd be the one to get the takedowns. So I think he batters him for majority of the 50 minutes. I think Saragih makes a decision, but give me Jubli by decision.
All right. That brings us to the 5-fight main card of UFC Fight Night 218. And normally we have this discussion right off the top, but I forgot to. We kind of just dove straight in. Let's have a little bit of a talk about this right now.
You forgot because you were so excited to get to this card. like Makhachev, Volkanovski next card. Who cares about that? Let's talk about Kim and Bohm. You want to break that fight down again?
Oh my goodness. Well, what if we have like an eye poke, no contest or something, and they decide to run it back for all the marbles in 3 months?
We already taped it. There you go.
Yeah. Give a letter grade to this overall card.
Yeah, it's a D. I was thinking about giving it an F. The start time definitely doesn't help. Yeah. I understand why they're doing it. They realize that majority of their card is Korean fighters and Chinese fighters and Japanese fighters and India, Indonesia. What else? What other countries do we have?
I think that's it. But again, there's only 3 Americans. Got a Russian. But dude, there's 3 Americans, 1 Canadian, and 1 Mexican on this card. That's it for the North America time zones.
Yeah, so I understand why they're doing that. So, but still, I'm talking from on the East Coast Americans, so I'm judging from my perspective. But also, like, what are you telling your fans that, hey, we have this big, huge tournament to get these guys in the UFC, and then we're gonna put them on the prelims? This is the finals of the tournament. We're gonna put on the prelims. Is anybody tuning into this card was not gonna tune in? If that was on the main card and like you dropped other, and again, it might be a logistical thing it probably is more of a logistical thing being that, Indonesia is way the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So it might be that I'm not thinking of.
No, but I think I see that same observation, but I see it almost from the other side, because this card, I don't think the average fan in North America is going to watch this thing no matter what time it's on. Like, nobody's even making a trip to Dave & Buster's or like the Wings for this thing.
Well, I think that's why they're putting it at the time.
Yeah, I agree. They're like, maybe we can get more people in Asia to watch this if we put it at a convenient time for them, because, you know, the average casual North American fan is not going to give the first shit about this card. I mean,
I'm thinking, like, if that's the case, why don't you put those guys on the main? I mean, you do this tournament, put them on the main card.
But this 5-fight main card on paper is probably the worst main card in UFC history. Like, you know, I'm not saying the fights are going to be bad or boring, but just in terms of the divisional stakes. Okay, here, let me call them off to you. Okay, opener, Kinoshita versus Fugitt. It is a debuting fighter from the Contender Series versus a guy who's 0-1 in the UFC.
Fantastic.
The next one, Choi versus Kyle Nelson. It's a guy on a 3-fight losing streak against a guy who's 1-4 in the UFC.
And Choi hasn't fought in like
2.5 years.
Yeah,
3 years almost.
Like Christopher Columbus was sailing the ocean blue last time he fought.
Exactly. And he lost. Like, again, like he's 3 years removed from a 3-fight losing streak. Tybura versus Ivanov. It's a middling kind of 10 through 15 heavyweight matchup, and it's probably going to be NyQuil. Da Jung versus Devin Clark. Like, Jeong is surprisingly good. Clark is average. And then Lewis versus Spivak, which is, I mean,
it is what it is.
It is what it is. Like, at this point, you plug Lewis in when you need a fight night headliner.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. Like, Lewis is the guy at this point in his career, obviously the big knockouts, but more so say something funny, his character. Yeah. So we're gonna have him saying funny things at, I don't know what time, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning when he actually fights. If he wins, like, the UFC should do the opposite. Like, hey, this is for the other side of the world. We're gonna do a complete opposite. Like, just flip the entire card. Like, Derek Lewis, Sergey Spivak,
open the thing up.
First fight. Just go down the other way.
That'd be hilarious. Hey, and honestly, Tatsuro Taira as the headliner works for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Jesus Aguilar getting the least known fighter since Ted Williams headline a UFC pay-per-view. Steve Judson.
Wow, Steve Judson.
I like that reference, huh?
I mean, dude, Steve Judson got more famous out of less cage time. Like, just being part of that knockout of, like, the Brad Kohler,
Yeah.
Because that was part of the UFC's like little sizzle reel for so many, like, well into the post-tough era. Like, that was still, the one where you saw like the UFC 20 like background, and it's all like, low definition. They just kept that forever because it looks so cool, man. Is that how badly we don't want to talk about Kinoshita versus Fugitt? That we're talking about.
I actually don't mind this fight. On the scale of the fights on the card, this one doesn't bother me.
Yeah. And one advantage of the whole card being so thin is, like, there's no fight that we're going like, why is this on the main card instead of? Because shall we dive in and talk about it?
Yeah, I was going through the saying what's the worst card, this card or UFC 24 First Defense. And that's the one that we were talking about, Ted Williams versus Steve Judson main event. Steve, not Boston Red Sox Hall of Famer Ted Williams.
Not that Ted Williams.
Ted with 2 Ds. Ted Williams, 6-0, taking on 0-1, knocked out, and one of the worst knockouts in history, Steve Judson. But in fairness, just to give you guys a little history lesson, that was the infamous Kevin Randleman slipping on a pipe in his and perfectly. The name of the card is First Defense. Fantastic.
You can't make this stuff up, guys.
Yeah.
Ted Williams with 2 Ds for a double dose of his pimping. All right. First up on the UFC Fight Night 218 main card is a welterweight matchup between Yusaku Kinoshita and Adam Fugitt. Kinoshita, the 22-year-old from Osaka, is 6-1 overall. He is making his debut here, having knocked out Jose Enrique Souza on the Contender Series last August. He's going to step in against Fugitt. The 34-year-old American is 8-3 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut last July at UFC 277, stepping in on short notice for, I believe it's Ramiz Brahimaj that had to drop out. But he stepped in against Michael Morales, made it to the third round before getting knocked out by the young Ecuadorian. He comes back here, faces off against yet another very young prospect in Kinoshita, and he is not favored to do well. Kinoshita minus 280, Fugitt plus 235 on the comeback. Keith, like Fugitt against Morales was a terrible style matchup. I mean, one, he's stepping up on short notice. Two, he's stepping up against an explosive kickboxer with a ton of power. And he honestly showed out better than I thought he was going to. I believe I had Morales by first round knockout in that fight, and he made it all the way to the third round. And honestly, he gave Morales some trouble. Like Morales was not absolutely winning that fight before he knocked out Fugitt. And Fugitt just did what he does. He's a big welterweight, he's tall. He has some muscle on his frame. He's not very athletic, but he comes forward and he throws and kind of just dares his opponent to beat him. And that actually worked against Morales for most of 2 rounds. Like he kind of threw Morales off. Morales is a guy that likes to wait for his perfect shot and then just ice his opponents. And Fugitt didn't really give it to him. At 34, Fugitt probably is what he is. So I'm going to assume he's going to come to this fight with that same kind of approach. And he's coming in against a guy that might be a slightly worse version of Morales here. Kinoshita, he got a fantastic knockout on the Contender Series, but that kind of masks the fact that he was not absolutely winning the fight against Souza until he knocked him out. Like Souza gave him all kinds of trouble. Kinoshita got hurt in that fight. Souza hurt him on the feet. He was able to get him to the ground. And another thing, it was like this mess of a fight that had a bunch of fouls and stuff, but I have the feeling that Kinoshita is going to beat Fugitt. He's going to find some opening and just nail him with a counter and flatten him, or, end up in a scramble and just take his back and choke him out, or grab a front headlock and guillotine him. But kind of like both of their last fights, I think it's going to be pretty close right up until he does. I think Fugitt is just kind of tailor-made to frustrate Kinoshita, and I think this is the kind of fight where Kinoshita will get the win, but have a lot to go back to, a lot to take back to camp, a lot to take back to the drawing board. I picture Kinoshita's coaches yelling at him in Japanese a lot between rounds, and the translator trying to keep up with what they're saying. Give me Kinoshita by third round TKO here in a fight that it might be anybody's fight right up until the time he finishes it.
It'd be funny if the UFC should just do like the old Bruce Lee style movies where they instead of translate, just have him like echoing his mouth is moving and it's like the English going at the same time. And it's
like dub it.
Yeah. Anything to try to make this card more pleasing. I agree. I actually agree with a lot what you said about Fugitt. I think he's better than his record shows and what your overall take of him. I'm a little bit higher on. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. Kinoshita.
Kinoshita. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a little higher on Kinoshita than I think you are. Fugitt, he's a southpaw. He's got some defensive holds. He drops his hands. But I like that he presses the action, and he hardly ever backs up. He was doing against Michael Morales. He's kind of this like stand your ground type fighter where if you hit him, he's going to try to answer back with one shot of his own. He stays busy with strikes. He throws some hard strikes. He's got some good power in his hands. Throws a lot of kicks, teep kicks up the middle. He does have 3 submission wins. And he blends striking and takedowns together well. He does reach a little bit for his takedown. He's not the most technical sound wrestler. He's not one of these guys who's like, he's not going to drive to the second level, drive through your hips, cut an angle correctly or anything like that. But he's shown a well-rounded game. But he's up there in age for a guy who's in his second debut. He's already 34 now. So he's kind of probably a finished product where Kinoshita, he's only 22, and he's at the age where he can make some huge improvements. The big thing that stands out to me is how much confidence he has. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He goes out there walking down his opponents, and he looks like a guy just believes that good things going to happen. He's a southpaw. He does. He's a southpaw. He does change his stance a little bit, but he's probably better at the southpaw stance. He has this karate background with his wide stance, and he marches forward with, I would say, controlled pressure. He's a good striker. He's good head movement. His knockout in his last fight, he's like the slide back, slide out of the way back. A beautiful left hand was beautiful. It was one of the best knockouts in Dana White Contender Series history. Laura Sanko described him, said that he kind of reminds him of Conor McGregor. And I'm not saying he's going to win 2 titles or anything like that. It's going to be, this big, huge star. But his style of fighting is like Conor. Like even the way he presses his stance, his step back left hand. He's got some hard kicks. He has defensive holes. One, he keeps his chin really high. Like Conor, he drops his hands. I haven't seen too much on the ground, but he does have a few subs on his record. I think because of Fugitt's style, like he's going to press the action. I think we have some fireworks on our hands. I think both guys will be the ones who want to press the action to kind of see who's going to force the other guy in the back foot. I think Fugitt will wrestle a little bit, and that's probably his best avenue for victory. But I'm going to go with the younger guy. Like I said, I think Fugitt is a finished product. He's a guy that, would like his career highlight is I made it to the UFC. Telling people 10 years from now when he's well retired, I used to be in the UFC, maybe coaching somebody or running a gym or something like that, kind of always having that title. Well, Kinoshita, he's a guy that could make an impact in the UFC. Like he could be, much higher. He could be a main event. I don't know if say main event, but like he's a guy that, one day he could crack the top 15 if he continues to improve. So I'll go with the guy with a much higher upside. I say he gets the better of the 250 minutes. I think Fugitt is tough, so I don't think Kinoshita will finish him. So I'll take Kinoshita by decision.
All right.
Kinoshita, that sounds like a badass last name. Like it sounds like the villain in like a movie.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the Kinoshita is coming.
Oh yeah, totally. Or I mean, I'm sure you're not into this nerdy shit, but it sounds like the name of like the sword in an anime. Oh, you have the Kinoshita, and they go, shing,
yeah. Like I'm watching like a Ninja Turtles movie, and it's like, oh, Shredder got the Kinoshita.
Yeah, exactly. The UFC Vegas 68 main card powers on with a matchup in the featherweight division between Doo-Ho Choi and Kyle Nelson. Choi, the 31-year-old South Korean who goes by the Korean Superboy. At 31, maybe he needs to become the Korean Superman. Just saying. At any rate, he is 14-4 overall. He is 3-3 in the UFC. And just like an inning of baseball, it has been 3 up, 3 down for him. He won his first 3 fights in the promotion, beating Juan Manuel Puig, Sam Sicilia, and Thiago Tavares. Before running into Cub Swanson in December of 2016. He dropped a unanimous decision there in one of the greatest fights in UFC history. Like,
to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's in the UFC Hall of Fame, and therefore Doo-Ho Choi is in the UFC Hall of Fame, unlike Jens Pulver and Jorge and Gracie. At any rate, that the Swanson fight, unfortunately for Choi, marked the beginning of a slide. Since then, he came back a little over a year later, got knocked out by Jeremy Stevens, came back almost 2 years after that, thanks to some injuries, and got knocked out by Charles Jourdain. That was in December of 2019. He then went in for mandatory Korean military service. He is returning from that after a layoff of just over 3 years and facing Nelson. Nelson, also 31 years old. He is 13-5 overall. He is 1-4 in the UFC. Losses to Diego Ferreira and Matt Sales, a win over Marco Polo Reyes, then 2 more losses in a row. against Billy Quarantillo and Jai Herbert. The most recent of those, the Herbert loss, was a unanimous decision at UFC Fight Night Blades versus Aspinall. That would be UFC London 2 last July. So two gentlemen badly in need of a win here. I mean, you never know what the UFC is going to do with someone like Choi, who has a certain amount of residual name value. I mean, the guy is literally in the UFC Hall of Fame, even if it's the fight wing. But 4 losses in a row, I mean, that spells doom for most people not named Sam Alvey or BJ Penn. And then Nelson, again, 1-5 in the UFC. And unlike Choi, he's about as anonymous as they come. Where, I mean, every time he fights, I have to remember who he is. Keith, again, except for the fighters themselves, this is about as low stakes a fight as you're going to find on a UFC main card in 2023. What do we even say about Doo Ho Choi right now? Because for one thing, it seemed like he was going to be 23 years old forever. But the thing is, he debuted in the UFC in November of 2014. So just over 8 years ago. He has 6 fights in 8 years. Even before the whole Korean military service thing, what took, like Korean Zombie out of the picture. Even before that, the guy was a once-a-year fighter. He fought once in 2014, once in 2015, twice in 2016, and then like it's all like any upside, any shine, it's all gone. And how do you even pick a fight for a guy that we haven't seen in over 3 years? Like, what indication do we have that his skill set, let alone his athleticism, are going to be anything like what they were? Like, I know what Kyle Nelson is. I saw him fight 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly what it is. It's, the devil you know versus the devil you don't know kind of thing. Doo Ho Choi, like you mentioned, he hasn't fought in 3 years.
I'm sorry. Let me get this out. The reason I brought this up, Choi, minus 195, Nelson plus 160.
Wow.
And that's the best line I could find. Choi is a greater than 2-1 favorite.
I mean, I know there's people who bet out every single fight, but like you're dropping, 2-1 favorite on Choi. Like you have confidence in that? Like the guy hasn't fought in 3+ years. I was looking at his opponent. His last fight was Charles Jourdain. Charles Jourdain, since that fight, has fought 8 times since Doo Ho Choi last fought. Wow. Like, it's insane. His last win, I mean, you're talking about the injuries, the service, the losing streak. The last time he won, I think it was 6.5 years ago. I mean, I think that was on the Ted Williams, Steve Judson card. Like this, like I mean,
the Boston Red Sox Ted Williams was still alive back then. Yeah, 1D Ted.
Yeah. So it's so tough to analyze a fight like this because it's not all the ones that just want to like take a pass. Like we're taking a pass. We're not making a pick for this one. I mean, everything you're based on Choi. I mean, I've always had a hard time. Like, do I base on what I last saw or just wild guess of, it's like there's a smoking hot chick in high school who still smoking hot chick and she's 40. There's a smoking hot chick in high school. Another one looked like she ate the girl, the other one. So, what are we going to have? I mean, what I've last seen of him, he's a boxer that, he's a little flat footed. He's a bit of a stationary target. He's always been pretty hittable because of that. But his offensive boxing was always solid. Quick hands, likes to get in the pocket, unload big combinations. Straight hard punches down the pipe. He loves his get in there and throw a rear uppercut. Nice snap on his shots. Good power. I mean, he's got 11 KOs. Even he was he got knocked out by Jourdain, but he was having success early. He was hurting Jourdain in that fight. And he has this power. Now he's 30. I think we say 31.
Yep, they're both 31.
Now the age where you start, really coming into your power. 8 years. He has no kicks though. He's never had a kicking game. He will toss out some spinning attacks, which he actually hit Cubs watch with a lot, which obviously made the fight was super exciting. But I'm also worried about his chin. He's been knocked, and he was knocked out in his last 2 fights, and then he had that all-time fight against Cubs Watson that it takes a lot out of you. Having a long layoff makes me feel a little bit better. He's never really been a wrestler. He needs to improve his takedown defense. He's been taken down a couple times in the UFC. He only has one submission win in his career, but despite everything we've seen of him, we haven't seen him slow down. Like, his cardio is still pretty good. Again, what will it be in this fight? I have no idea. Kyle Nelson, high output circuit. He's a boxer that I'll say his straight right is his best. Decent pop, a lot of winging power shots. I like that he targets the body. He throws a lot of calf kicks, hard calf kicks. Like his last fight against Jai Herbert, he had some success in that fight with calf kicks. Though he does throw them naked, he can grind. He can get in the clinch and just win some dirty boxing. He has some takedowns. I wouldn't say he's a powerful wrestler, but he finds ways to get the fight to the ground. He has 4 submission wins. But the big concern is he uses a lot of edge. I mean, he really slowed down against Jai Herbert. Billy Quarantillo beat him, and that's definitely not the guy you want to get tired against. Billy Quarantillo really turned it up when Kyle Nelson started to slow down. I already called the fight the best fight in the card. This is the hardest fight to pick on the entire card because, like we said, when you're making a bet on Duho, how can you have any confidence in Duho Choi? I can see Nelson get some takedowns against him. I also can see Nelson kicking out his legs. This should be as even a fight ever. Like, this should be a straight pick 'em, flip a coin. I want to say F it. I always like Choi. Like, he's fun. I'm hoping he's still the same guy. I think Nelson's a little better than he's showed. He's also had some tough, like Quarantillo and Jai Herbert, your last 2 fights. That's a rough stretch. Those are some good guys. But you know what? Choi in his prime was better than Kyle Nelson is in his last fight. So if he's close to that prime guy, he should win this fight. So I'm gonna say Choi. He's safe. Like, F it. Like, you gotta be guessing at this fight, so I'll guess that he's still pretty good. So I'll say Choi by second round knockout.
Yeah, I am word for word with you on the entire breakdown there until we pull into the final turn, the final straightaway, and I'm like, I don't know if Choi is the same guy. Like,
but you got to remember one thing: I hate Canadians too. So
okay, well, yeah,
I have that going.
you stole everything that was good from Canada in the form of your lovely wife, and the rest of the country can just suck it. Yeah. Charles Rodin gonna be knocking on Keith's door. No, if Choi comes back 3 years later and is, as good as he was, comparable, even incrementally better, that would make him the exception rather than the rule in terms of those,
that's a very good point.
Korean fighters and so I'm not going to believe it until I see it. Like, Kyle Nelson has been the more active.
I'm sorry. The Korean Zombie came back just as good. I mean, he rushed right back up to be the top 10 guy.
Undeservedly. Like, they stuck him right back into top 10 matchups. But
no, who was the guy? His first fight back, he starts him.
What's his best win since he's been back? Huh.
Okay. Frank Edgar. I wasn't prepared. We weren't prepared to talk about it.
No, but now
we're going to somebody. His very first fight back. It was somebody pretty good too.
Here, let's take a look here. He comes back. Dennis Bermudez is his first fight back. He beats Dennis Bermudez. Yeah.
That was
he's beaten Moicano.
That was a good win at that time too.
No, so you're right. Like, Jeong has been solid since he's been back.
I mean, he went all the way up to the title.
Yeah. He made it back into the title picture. You're right. But
one thing is, again, generally speaking, the long layoffs, that's the exception to the rule.
Yeah. And
at their primes, even though Duho Choi was good, the Korean Zombie was always another level better.
Yeah. I mean, like, my point stands, even if my supporting detail has now been decidedly disproven.
There's always that one guy. I mean, I'm not going to mention like George St. Pierre being gone for a really long time and then coming back and winning the UFC title. I'm not going to mention that. I'm not going to mention Dominic Cruz being out for a really long time and winning the UFC title in his return. I'm not going to mention that was Ben. I'm not that kind of co-host that would
He's just cutting the man's legs off right now. Like, in the case of Choi, though, I will believe it when I see it. And I'm going to say, yeah, Nelson pulls out the decision here. If Choi can force a frenetic fight that gets Nelson tired, then all this turns on a dime. but give me Nelson to win the decision here, to catch Choi on the feet a few times, to either deny the takedown or get takedowns, like, as depending on what he wants to happen here. But yeah, he's been the more active guy. He's been competitive against good fighters, and Choi is a wait and see for me until at least after this fight. So I will take the upset here. Nelson by decision. We head now to the heavyweight division for a matchup between Marcin Tybura and Blagoy Ivanov. Tybura, the 37-year-old Pole, is 23-7 overall. He is 10-6 in the UFC. He won his last time out. Took a majority decision over Alexander Romanov. I believe that was Romanov's first professional loss. That was back at UFC 278 last August. That allowed him to come back from a unanimous decision loss to Alexander Volkov all the way back in October of 2021. He faces off here against Ivanov, the 36-year-old Bulgarian, who is 19-4 with one no contest overall. He is an even 3-3 in the UFC. He won his last time out as well. That was a unanimous decision win over Marcos Rogerio de Lima at UFC 274 last May. Prior to that, he was on a 2-fight losing streak against Augusto Sakai and Derek Lewis. The odds here do slightly favor Tybura. He's minus 150, Ivanov plus 130 or so. This fight was originally scheduled all the way back in March of 2021. It was going to take place back then. Ivanov had to withdraw from that one with an injury, and both men went their separate ways since then. Like, they've both had fights since then. But here, they managed to pull Ivanov away from the beaches of Bulgaria with his, his beach dad body, and get him back into the cage against Tybura. Keith, I mean, it's heavyweight. Even though we're in the middle of a youth movement, we got a bunch of interest. Like, all of a sudden the top 10 is full of guys under the age of 32 or 33. We got people under 30 like winning fights. Nonetheless, this 36-year-old, 37-year-old man, both of whom have been in the UFC for what feels like forever, this fight has sneaky outside rankings implications. I mean, who you got in this one? And can you believe that of these two, Tybura is the older one by looking at them?
No. We had Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, but
yeah. Speaking of Bulgaria, I'm glad that you shut out Bulgaria. I mean, we are the most popular podcast in Bulgaria, so shout out to all our listeners in Bulgaria. Yeah. Okay. This fight. So Tybura is this guy that I was never like. I always thought like, okay, he's a top 20-ish heavyweight, but I was never that high on him. And he's just one of these guys. He's just kind of grown on me over the years. Where I'm like, wow, he's a little bit better than I thought. And Spivak, same thing in the main event. I feel the same way. He's well rounded. He's got some high volume for a heavyweight. He likes to press the action, march down his opponent. Has quick hands for obviously what I'm saying is for a heavyweight. I like that he's an intelligent fighter. Like, one thing he likes to do, he wants to grind in the clinch. So he uses like a front kick to kick his opponent back to the fence. And then he uses the distance, close the distance quickly and gets him there. He uses a lot of his striking just to close the distance. He wants to force his opponent back in his cage because, one, he doesn't like being pressured himself. Two, he's good in there. He can grind. I mean, he can land. Yeah, he can win an outside kickboxing match, but really he likes that fight that most people don't like, grueling underhook, wear on his opponent, lean on his opponent. I mean, he was able to outdo Alexander Romanov in a grindy fight, which most people can't. And a lot of that had to do with Romanov hitting a wall, but that's also because Tybura can battle in there. Tybura can get back up. He can get taken out and just keep working, and made Romanov fight for every single takedown that he had, and just made him work for those small positions, which tired Romanov out. I think Tybura is an underrated offensive wrestler. Again, he's one of these guys who just gets you in the clinch, works the grinds on you, has you thinking about that. Then all of a sudden he's dropping down on a single and running a pipe or something like that. He's not going to blast. He's not Cain Velasquez. He's not going to blast through through your hips. But he's crafty. That's kind of how, actually, I think both these guys are they're crafty kind of guys. He'll catch a kick to get a takedown. He is a BJJ black belt. he's definitely a top side grappler. He's got 6 submissions on his record. Blagoy Ivanov. Did you know that Blagoy Ivanov beat Fedor Emelianenko in a sambo match? I don't know if that's ever been brought up. I think anytime they've ever talked about it, I don't know if that's ever been brought up.
Clearly that means he's gonna be a greater MMA fighter than Fedor.
I mean, like he beat him in a sambo match 150 years ago. MMA fans just love saying that over and over, like somehow it's relevant today. Like the
people who still say that today, like not counting you saying it ironically, are people that have never watched sambo in their lives.
Yeah, it's like, dude, and it was 150 years ago. They were battling each other at the OK Corral. Like, give me a break. Like that was the co-main event to the Cowboys and versus Wyatt Earp. So yeah, I recently watched Tombstone. Give me a break. He's a southpaw. He's definitely a shorter heavyweight. He isn't much of an athlete anymore. He was never a great athlete to begin with, but he's faded more as the years gone on. He's a little flat-footed. He's a bit of a stationary target defensively. He's fairly technically sound. He uses a lot of feints well to set up his shots. He's got a good jab. He likes to kind of lull a little bit, stay outside, and then just kind of suddenly burst in and get inside, slide into the pocket, and land some stuff. He can battle in there, similar to Tybura. He doesn't mind a grindy fight. He will attack to the body while he's inside. He kind of whips his overhand left. But for a heavyweight, he lacks one punch fight ending power. He's one of the few heavyweights. Like, obviously, he can knock you out. I mean, he's still the big guy. But generally speaking, if we're ranking all the heavyweights' power, I mean, he's near the very bottom. He also doesn't check leg kicks in his fight against Augusto Sakai. Augusto Sakai had a lot of success just kicking his legs out. But the grueling affair is where this could, be a big factor. I mean, he likes to get in. He's a good wrestler. He's similar the way he likes to get inside, do like a snatch single. DC always, and I've left this in my notes for a while because something that I thought was interesting. DC always talked about how he looks for the whizzer kick inside the clinch, which something to watch if he gets in this battle. The other thing about him that is still impressing me over these years, like I said, his athleticism is faded, but his chin has it. I mean, he's never been knocked out. He eats huge shots. Like go back to the Derek Lewis fight. He was eating shots. He kept coming forward. He does that in every fight. And he's got good cardio. Like he can still go hard for 15 minutes. So my prediction is both these these are tough dudes. And these are definitely not heavyweights the UFC ever really wants on the market. Like they don't want one of these guys challenging for the title. But well, Ivanov still can be competitive. I do think he's on the decline. I think it's starting to show a little bit. And Tybura is probably still in his prime. So even though he's the older one, he wasn't battling in sambo against the Russians. So give me Tybura to get the better of the two. I don't think it's going to be a blowout or anything. It's just going to be like a just grueling affair with Tybura just getting the better. So give me Tybura by decision.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you here. Like, I don't have any points really to contradict. For me, it's pretty simple. I mean, both of these guys are about as known a quantity as you can get in the UFC right now. Like, I would say Tybura has diversified his arsenal a little bit more. But he's been in the UFC for like 8 years. He's fought like 20 times. But Tybura in the last 3 years, he is 6-1. And the only person who's beat him is Alexander Volkov. And the Volkov beat him doing things that Ivanov isn't going to try to do and couldn't do if he wanted to. Like, Volkov did a brilliant job of denying Tybura the clinch. Like, Volkov is one of the tallest, longest guys in the sport. And unless he's fighting someone with incredible speed and athleticism, he's very good at using his reach. He just used that Volkov front kick up the middle, tons of hand fighting and his jab, and frustrated Tybura the whole time. Because you mentioned that Tybura loves to grind in the clinch. Thing is, Ivanov wants to grind in the clinch as well. Like these guys, by mutual assent, this is going to be one of those fights where 80% of the action takes place with one of or both of these guys literally touching the fence. Like they could hollow out everything inside that warning track, and they could just fight on the outside 3 feet of the cage, and they'd probably both be fine. You know, you could like start them each like in front of their own corner. They'd have to walk around the edge to meet, and they'd both be perfectly happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's two guys with pretty stout chins and subpar power for heavyweight who prefer the clinch. So, I mean, we're not a betting podcast, but whatever the prop is for this thing to go to the distance, hammer that shit.
Yeah, I agree.
And then go out and smoke. I don't even care if you don't smoke. Start smoking just so you have an excuse to walk out while this fight is going on, because this is going to be absolute NyQuil, and it's going to be happening at like 3:30 in the morning on top of that, which is fine for me because 3:30 is right around the time like I'm looking to have dinner. But yeah, like this one's going to be rough. Give me Tybura by decision.
Could you imagine trying to stay awake and you get in that fight? I think that fight would make me fall asleep just talking about it.
It's the thing is, the reason I looked everything up before we started was I felt like we had already previewed this fight.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels, have these guys already fought like twice or something? I just
have these guys fought like, this is a rivalry. This is like the fourth time fighting. You know, he got stabbed in the heart. Did you know that?
Oh, you don't say.
I don't know if they've ever mentioned that before.
Like, I'd love for the legends to just become conflated and like 50 years down, people like, he got stabbed by Fedor Emelianenko. Like
at the OK Corral.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
The co-main event of UFC Vegas 68 is a light heavyweight matchup between Jeong and Devin Clark. Jeong, the 29-year-old Korean, is 15-3-1 overall. He's 4-1-1 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. His first UFC loss. He got knocked out by Dustin Jacoby in the first round at UFC on ABC, Ortega versus Rodriguez last July. Prior to that, he had entered the UFC on a 5-fight unbeaten streak with wins over Kadis Ibragimov, Mike Rodriguez, a draw with Sam Alvey, and then wins over William Knight and Kennedy Nzechukwu. So Jeong will be looking to get back on the winning track, and standing in his way will be Clark, the 32-year-old American, 13-7 overall. He is an even 7-7 in the UFC. He has lost 3 of his last 4. He beat William Knight last April, knocked him out in the 3rd round, but that allowed him to come back from back-to-back losses to Anthony Smith and Iwan Kutalaba, and then he returned from the Knight win and got knocked out by Azakat Mirzakhanov. That was at UFC on ESPN, Vera versus Cruz last August. So, I mean, I feel like we've already spent enough time slagging and dunking on this main card, but considering that this main card it's what the UFC laid out. This was on purpose. There are no late replacements here. There are no makeshift matchups. This is the card the UFC wanted to give us for a main card. It's pretty rough that there's someone fighting in a co-main event that's probably going to get cut if he loses. Like normally, even for a fight night card, we want something with like some top 10 implications. Like it doesn't have to be a title eliminator, but I mean, well, actually, here you go. This is a fight where it has ranking implications for one guy, and it has like cut from the roster implications from the other. Because if Jeong lamps Clark, he's probably fighting a ranked guy in his next fight. And if Clark loses, like there's every possibility he's cut. That's a rough look. And the odds makers at least
they're not going to cut him because they're scared of his dad.
Well, I know that. I'm glad his dad's not my dentist because he don't give a shit about your teeth getting knocked out.
Yeah, like they should sign Clark's dad for the slap league. Oh, God. I think he'd do it right.
Oh, man. The scenario I just laid out there, odds makers at least believe that's how it's going to pan out. Jeong right now, -215. Clark +185. Keith, I'm definitely going to toss this one to you first here. I mean, who gets it done and how? And if you're picking Jeong to win, as I think you're probably going to, what kind of upside do you see for him in the now still wide open 205-pound division?
Yeah, I'll see this. I think Jeong, he has reached his ceiling. Like I'm not expecting him because he's not a great athlete, and there's still like an athleticism. Like you have to be a real specialist to be a minus athlete to really get top 5 guys. Like you have to be a Damian Maya type specialist to not be a great athlete to be extremely high. The one thing about Jeong that really surprised me is how big he is. I didn't realize it until his last fight when he was fighting Dustin Jacoby, and I was like, wow, he's like towering over. He looks like way bigger than Dustin Jacoby, who's not a small guy himself. He's a boxer with fairly fast hands. I think he's actually an underrated striker. Throws good straight punches, decent popper. Like I keep always bringing up the time he starts Mike Rodriguez. I like that he can get inside and work inside. Kenny Njoku is a humongous dude, and Dong Jeong like muscled him and elbowed him and like brutalized him with that. And you mentioned underrated wrestler. He got 8 takedowns against William Knight. And all of this, everything that I just said about him, the biggest thing that like the glue that holds us all together is, upper weight class type guy who has really good cardio. Like he's going to go hard all 15 minutes. Devin Clark also is really huge. I mean, he's got these huge, humongous legs on the feet. He's really worked on his striking a lot. When he first came in the UFC, he was a really one-dimensional fighter. That's not the case anymore. Like he can box, tight boxing. He's got some serious power, but he still has a lot of defense faults. One is that he's very hittable. 2, it seems like every single fight that Devin Clark's been in, it starts to turn to a brawl. He's been rocked or knocked out so many times. Go back to his last fight against Azmat Murzakanov. I think that was his last fight, right?
Yep.
Yeah, like he wasn't reacting well to the shots. He was getting hurt with every strike, which makes me wonder if his chin is, being in these big brawls that he's been in, eating so many shots, if it's starting to fail him. He's a very physically strong guy, though. He used that strength well when he's in the clinch. Plum clinch is solid. Really good landing knees. Go back to like the Alonzo Manafelt fight. He did really well, beat Manafelt in the clinch. He's a good wrestler. Like his reactionary double, kind of one of these guys he'll use your pressure against you, like he'll back up, then shoot when you overthrow a shot. He does turn the corner well. Solid top control, but he's also been submitted in the past, and he has a bad gas tank. He's gassed out a lot, and Jeong's not the guy that you want to slow down against. I really wanted to pick Clark, believe it or not, because while Jeong is I always have a hard time picking against the better credentialed wrestler because I always feel like that's an avenue they can go. But as he's gotten older, it gets harder and harder to wrestle. His cardio bothers me. His chin bothers me. So I really think we might have a guy who's faded. I think this might be the last we see of. Well, you know what? We talk about Devin Clark might be getting cut, and obviously you could justify cutting him. But he's been in some really exciting fights, so he might hold on another fight even after this one. But I think Jeong's gonna have probably the biggest one of his career. I think he's gonna batter him on the feet, hurt him eventually, and I think he gets a late stoppage. I say Jeong by 3rd round TKO.
Yeah, I like that you point out that Clark it reacts differently to getting hit than he did a couple years ago. Like I'm thinking of the Menafield fight where I favored Menafield to plaster Clark, and Clark survived and got Menafield tired, and he was a stronger guy by the end of the fight. And not only was that probably his best performance in the UFC, that was his last good performance in the UFC. It's not the most memorable. Like the quick loss to Anthony Smith was memorable, but his loss to Iwan Kutalaba was one of the worst beatdowns of 2021. Like, I don't think it won our beatdown of the year, but there were multiple 10-8 rounds in there. And that's the one where his teeth got knocked.
Yeah. He said he was feeling it. Like his
yeah. And we saw the gruesome picture afterwards where all 4 of his bottom teeth kind of like we're back, and you could see the gap down in the gums.
And you got to wonder if that's the reason why he's not reacting to shots.
No,
I see what you want about Kutalaba. I mean, that guy's a big, mean dude.
Yeah. And there was a lot of just ground and pound there. And Kutalaba, that's where he's nastiest because his defensive lapses go away when he's just sitting on you. I think that might have ended up being a game changer in a bad way for Clark.
Yeah,
and
it could be.
And I'm with you, man. Like, I don't know how high Jeong's upside is. You know, you may be right. He may have a hard ceiling here. If Dustin Jacoby can do that to him, there's plenty of other guys in that light heavyweight top 15 that are going to be able to do similar things. But
well, one thing I'll say is there is just some like dumb guys in the division who are ranked. Like like Jeong could easily just use a game plan and beat Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Even though Johnny Walker's about 1,000 times better athlete.
He's 1,000 times better athlete, hits way harder, but if he doesn't starch Jeong in 30 seconds, I start feeling better and better about Jeong's chances because he gasses out and he makes a ton of defensive misses. No, I'm with you. There are guys in the top 15 he can beat.
Yeah,
but there are
been in the top 15 for a long time, and he was never a great. He's kind of slow guy. Yeah. I mean, he hits like a truck. That's the thing. But he's free. Yeah, I mean, I'd favor him with Paul Craig right now. Mm-hmm. So I think it's actually. So I correct what I said. I think he can go up a couple more spots.
Yeah. I think he's going to at least like make a little run in there. I don't think he's going to make it even within 2 fights of a title shot. But the Clark fight here is kind of tailor made for him to look good. Like he's going to hit Clark on the feet, and Clark's not going to react well. And the question is going to become, can Jeong fight off like desperation takedowns from kind of a rung up Clark? I'm betting he'll be able to. Give me Jeong here by I'm going to say second round TKO, but it'll be. I mean, you mentioned that Clark is generally in exciting fights. This will be an exciting one, but I think in fairly one-sided fashion, and it'll be an open question on the recap whether we think, well, at least you're not going to be on that, but we think Clark should be cut and whether the UFC does. But yeah, I've got Jeong here as well. With that, we arrive at the main event of UFC Fight Night 218, a heavyweight clash between Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak. We actually previewed this one fairly recently because these two gentlemen were scheduled to meet at UFC Fight Night 215 back in late November. That one was canceled at the last minute because Lewis withdrew with an illness or injury, like literally on fight day. It was between weigh-ins and fight night, within the 24 hours before the fights. That decapitated that card. The fight has been pushed to this one. So all I'm really going to say before I kind of plug in our last preview is the line has moved a bit. When we last talked about this one, it was Spivak around minus 185 or 190, Lewis, plus 160 or plus 170. This time it is Spivak minus 215, Lewis plus 180. So it's going further in Spivak's favor, but I get that because one, Lewis is much older than Spivak. So as time passes, his chances of winning should change. And then the fact that the withdrawal last time was Lewis's fault, that's going to inspire a little more doubt or concern in people. I mean, if the last fight was canceled because Spivak was sick, I bet the line would be the same or closer now. So, but yeah, Lewis plus 185, Spivak minus 215. Keith, do you have any new or different thoughts than you had ahead of their meeting in November?
No, I definitely understand why the line moved, and I would say confidence in Derek Lewis goes down a little bit.
Sure,
but I'm not going to change my pick.
No, either. My pick is the same. So hold tight while we plug in this ancient VHS footage that I had to dig out of a crate in the basement. That brings us to the main event of UFC Fight Night 215, a heavyweight matchup between Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak. Lewis, the 37-year-old Houstonian, is 26-10 with one no contest overall. He is 17-8 in the UFC, and while he has been a title challenger, longtime contender, and just generally a staple of the division, he has lost 3 of his last 4, and all of them have been by finish. He got TKO'd by Ciryl Gane in the 3rd round in the headliner of UFC 265. Came back from that with a quick first-round knockout of Chris Daukaus, then got knocked out in the 2nd round by Tai Tuivasa at UFC 271 this February. Came back and got knocked out in the 1st round by Sergey Pavlovich at UFC 277 in July. He'll look to get things back on track against Spivak. The 27-year-old Moldovan is 15-3 overall. He is 6-3 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win streak. A first-round TKO of Greg Hardy, followed by a second-round TKO of Augusto Sakai. That most recent fight took place at UFC on ESPN, Santos versus Hill in August. So Lewis looking to not make it 3 in a row. Spivak looking to make it 3 in a row. Spivak is a comfortable favorite. He is minus 195. Lewis plus 165 as the underdog. It's funny that, you mentioned that you kind of skipped the tape study on Lewis, and I completely understand why, because, Lewis is Derek Lewis, and you and I have previewed, I think 4 or 5 of his fights. I didn't do any additional tape study, but I did revise my notes. Here's the thing. The book on Derek Lewis, my usual spiel has been the same for the 2 years or something that we've been doing these shows. He's not a one-dimensional slugger. He has a surprising, unconventional get-up game. His offensive arsenal is more diverse than you think. His cardio is better than you think. And through it all, he has an incredible chin and is surprisingly defensively sound. You don't rack up 26 fights in the UFC heavyweight division if your chin is just on the gunnery range every single fight. I've had to revise those notes a little bit. Tai Tuivasa knocked him out cold. Like, that was a Derek Lewis fight. He was toe-to-toe with another slugger. They were exchanging. They both got their licks in. Tuivasa was in trouble too, but Tuivasa was younger, fresher, and when he hit Lewis, this time Lewis went down, face planted. Surreal Gan pieced Lewis up with kicks, and just he dominated the distance. He controlled the rhythm of the fight. Lewis never really fully got untracked, and he just got out game plan. He just got beaten by a better fighter, and then Pavlovich took all of 55 seconds, ran right through him. So Lewis, I mean, you can argue that the division has caught up with him and passed him to some extent. I mean, Gan, Tuivasa, and Pavlovich are all part of the youth movement in the heavyweight division. They're guys that, I mean, they weren't in the division. Well, I mean, Tuivasa might have been in the division 5 years ago, but he was not the guy he is now. He was a sideshow. He was what all the punchlines about Lewis were. He barely trains. He's just this kind of big sloppy dude. Like, these guys weren't in the UFC, or they weren't the fighters they are, just a couple of years ago. So it's possible that at 37, the chin is starting to go. The surprisingly adept reflexes in close quarters have slipped just that little bit. And this being a game of inches where all these guys have power, it's enough to knock Lewis out of the top 5 where he's been for a long, long time. I mean, that would make me sad to see, because Lewis is the type of fighter that if the chin and the reflexes are gone, he's going to end his UFC run on a string of ugly knockouts, because he doesn't know another way to fight, and he's not going to survive the firefights that he has for so long. Spivak is a developing striker, but he is neither Gan nor is he Tuivasa. Spivak has been steadily improving throughout his UFC run. Like, he's undergone a physical transformation, just as, I think he's gotten older. He's still only 27, but as he's gotten access to better training, I mean, hell, he probably wasn't even doing this full time when he got to the UFC. Like, he got to the UFC off of wins over like Tony Lopez and Travis Fulton, and he was just kind of like this. He was like this, pudgy 23-year-old kid from Moldova. Now he's like 10 pounds heavier and has dropped 10 pounds of fat. He's becoming a better striker. Still kind of a grinder to me. Like, just clinch mauling and ground mauling are still his thing. And you would think that would be a recipe for, okay, this might be the highest ranked guy that Lewis has this good a shot of beating. I am picking Lewis here, and it's not like a homer pick.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a homer pick, because the one thing I will say is, for a fighter who is as associated with his hometown as Derek Lewis is, and Derek Lewis is one of the more popular fighters in the UFC, but he is as popular in Texas as any fighter in the UFC. Like, he might as well be Conor McGregor in Ireland for how popular he is.
All right, slow it down a little bit. You can go with the number 2 one if you want, not Conor. You can go to the number 2 one if you want.
He's like the Diaz brothers in in the Bay Area or North. Like, to the point where he like breaks through into regular media and like regular like grocery stores and restaurants are doing promotions. About the Yeah, dude. The Popeye's chicken, like Popeye's chicken, 10 miles from me, gave out free chicken if he beat. I mean, they weren't risking much because it was if he beat Daniel Cormier for the interim title. But
I want Derek Lewis wearing like a Bucky shirt. Like you walk around like Bucky's and there's pictures of Derek Lewis.
I guarantee you he has a Bucky shirt.
Everyone in Texas has a Bucky shirt.
But dude, for a guy that is such a hometown hero, he fights so badly in Texas compared to how he fights in the Apex. Like, he's undefeated in the Apex, and he's lost his the 3 fights he's lost in his last 4, they've all been in Texas. I'm not saying that it's completely attributable to that, but it is in some ways. When he's at home, surrounded by his entourage, not just, Bob Perez and the few people that travel with him. Tuivasa might have beaten him anyway, but that was Lewis trying to get a knockout for the hometown fans.
Sure.
He just does better at the Apex. Like, if he fights a sensible fight, I think, like, again, unless he really has faded, this is kind of tailor-made for Lewis because he'll get the better of things on the feet against Spivak. Spivak doesn't have Tuivasa one-shot power, not even close. He doesn't have Surreal Gun footwork and hand speed. If Spivak takes him down, Lewis's goofy, I'm going to bench press you and then stand up, get up game still seems to work on most UFC heavyweights. There's not a whole lot of confidence here. At 37, I am resigning myself to the idea that Lewis's run as a top 5 heavyweight is probably over. If he loses here, his run as a top 10 heavyweight is over, and I don't envision any of it getting better. Like, he's aging, a new generation is coming up. Spivak is part of that generation, but stylistically, this should still be right in Derek Lewis's wheelhouse. Give me Lewis by a 3rd round KO here, probably having lost one or both of the first 2 rounds, probably having gotten taken down and had to take his time getting back up. But yeah, not super confident in it. And if Spivak runs through him, then I've learned something this weekend. But give me one last great hurrah for Derek Lewis in the empty and relatively quiet UFC Apex that has become his second home.
Yeah, so just to give some clarity, because I know people like to follow our picks and bet, and again, I always like to tell people, like, we're not a betting show. Don't. Yeah. I mean, we give you some advice. I don't even like tell people to bet. I just don't like it. Yeah. I'm just worried about your money, I guess. Yeah. But we try to give some information, what we see. Sometimes we have really, really good nights. Sometimes we have really bad nights. And one thing I do say that we don't do is we don't brag if we have good nights. We don't. At least I don't think we do. We might tease each other a little bit, but we're not trying to be like, oh, it's easy money like always. Let's just like this.
Yeah, no. It is not easy money. If it was, we would bet.
We would be a betting show. Yeah. If you want betting advice, Jay Pesci writes a wonderful article on the website. Sean Sheehan does his top 5 picks, top 5 bets, excuse me. Yeah. Those are good shows. There's other betting things. But what I just want to give us a little background. So I didn't do any tape study. But what I do, and I do this every single fight card, I have my notes on each fighter that's fighting, and I will put I always do it like in italics, so I know that was for the last fight. Just things I noticed in their fight. So, like, in case I get to where I can't do tape study, at least I added my notes. I updated my notes since, whatever happens in this fight, there'll be updated notes on Derek Lewis. So it should be a little different than last time, but I just want to put that out there. And then what happens when I get to the week, I try to rewatch fights on them. Mm-hmm. Derek Lewis, he's gigantic. He's a gigantic human being. He moves. You mentioned it. He moves really well for a heavyweight. I always say that he has a really good high kick. I'm waiting for him to land a beautiful Mirko Krokop, put someone out with it. I love his flying knees. As I mentioned, even if you block one of his knees, it looks good. Just moves you across the cage. He's a very wait, and then explode kind of guy. He's historically the hardest hitter in the UFC history, the most knockouts. I've said this over and over and over again. He does not get enough credit for his accuracy. A lot of people just think of, the big guy, that's why he knocks people out. Yeah, it's also where he plays it, like catching Curtis Blades coming in and different things.
The Volkov knock. If you watch the Volkov knockout in slow motion, it's like pinpoint.
Yeah, and the thing about him and Francis Ngannou and the biggest guys is, the guys historically for the knockout power, even like Chuck Liddell, they don't have to land clean. They just have to land in a certain zone, and they're putting you out. And that's what he does so well. He doesn't get enough credit for his gas tank. We've talked about this, because he doesn't carry about it. He looks like he's tired. He looks like, even when he's fighting, he looks like he's always in pain. You know what I mean? Like, he just looks like his knees are hurting him, his back's hurting him.
It's kind of like, just hands are down a little bit and has his pain look on his face. Yep.
But when have we seen him tired? Like obviously he's tired. He's a heavyweight, but I mean, it was like, oh man, that fight was going really good until Derek Lewis gassed out. That doesn't happen.
Yeah. Nope.
And I mean, don't believe me, look at the numbers. How many late stoppages the guy has?
He is again. He's the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts now, but long before that, he was the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts in round 3 or later.
Yeah, other than having historically good power, take that out, he's everything. He's the complete opposite of what people view him as.
Yeah,
they look at him as a lumbering guy. No, he's extremely athletic. They look at him as a guy who was going to gas out because of that power. If you avoid his power, you gas out. No, he wins late fights. He is a bad wrestler, but as you mentioned, he's one of the hardest guys to hold on. Yeah, you have to be Daniel Cormier to hold him down. If you're not, he gets up. He waits. He gets a little bit of an opening, and then he gets back up to his feet. If he's on top of you, I say, anytime someone commits a terrible crime, something get rid of the death sentence. Just put Derek Lewis on top of you, dropping ground and pound. It must be the scariest thing ever. But the thing about him, it's always been that rock chin. Can't crack him. Don't stand in the pocket because you're not going to hurt him. He's going to hurt you. That's not the case. You mentioned Tai Tuivasa. Who was the other guy who just hurt him?
Pavlovich.
Yeah, Sergey Pavlovich. It's been back-to-back fights where he's been hurt bad. So I'm a little worried about his chin, and I'm also worried about how he responds to it. Is he going to be gun-shy? Will be scared to let his hands go. But I think Sergey Spivak is at least the guy that's not going to scare him in that route. Now, Sergey might scare him on the ground, but I don't know if Derek Lewis is going to be scared to, throw down with Sergey Spivak. Now, Spivak – he's flat-footed. He's a weak athlete, if we're being honest. He's not a good athlete on the feet. You mentioned that he's coming along as a striker. At one point, he was so one-dimensional. But he's a serviceable boxer. Throws a jab. He beat up Carlos Felipe with his jab. He follows a basic 1-2, basic kicking game. Has some holes defensively, pillars, which I don't like. Doesn't really move his head, but he's a good wrestler, and he's very unique style of wrestling. He's not Blasteria. He getting close, grab the clinch, look for foot sweeps. He throws a lateral drop, which if he does that to Derek Lewis, God bless him. I hope he does. I hope he does, because it'd be so much fun. And I don't root. I was talking about a guy the other day. I don't even root. I don't even root for my picks. I don't really care if I'm right or wrong. I know I root for the recap show. What's the most exciting thing to talk about in the recap show? That's what I root for. Yeah. Lateral dropping Derek Lewis, that'd be pretty fun to talk about.
It would be a great structural test of the octagon floor too. That shit would be loud as hell in the Apex.
Yeah, no shit. Was it you see you see regional, I don't know, what do you call them, wrestling shows, but they're not WWF, The ones in like the
Yeah, like the indie stuff. Like
yeah, okay, indie. That's what I was looking for. Indie, like indie scene. Like they're at like American Legions and shit, and like the big fat guy gets body slammed and the freaking the cheap ass ring collapse. Like I just want to see I just want to see Sergey Spivak like either lateral drop or even more impressive. Grab, and he likes headlocks. That's what I'm saying. Get a headlock where he does a full 5 points, like legs are flying over the head, move, both of them going in the air. And this lands in the octagon, the whole octagon just falls apart, just explodes.
Like the walls fall outwards.
Just goes out.
The middle of the floor just dents in.
Yeah, like with you see kids playing with their brothers, and they like fighting on. They go like smash on the coffee table, the whole coffee table explodes and shit, or a table or sofa.
That's the answer to the question. How could you have a UFC main event that ends in a no contest and it's actually a great thing?
That would be
that's it right there.
No, I'm sorry, dude. I know it technically is a no context, dude. If you hit a 5 point move on a heavyweight and the whole octagon explodes, that's a win. I'm sorry, Sergey Spivak wins.
Right.
Like,
I'll allow it.
You go back, like you pull out the rule book, like the rule that no one ever knows, and it's section 42F says if Sergey Spivak hits a headlock at Derek Lewis and the octagon explodes, Sergey Spivak wins.
Well, and the UFC would have to redesign the octagon. It would be kind of like after Shaq's first year in the NBA, they put breakaway rims because he broke like 10 backboards. It would be like that. It's like, okay, now we have the post Spivak octagon that's like reinforced differently.
It's funny that you mentioned Shaq because Lewis is like a Shaq. Well, one, they both have like those like funny like talking personalities. They have like that deep voice, but they're like funny what they say. And obviously, they're two huge human beings. But even like how Shaq was viewed in the NBA, and guys, I'm not like it's not an NBA podcast, so don't at me if I'm saying something stupid. But like Shaq never got a credit for his athleticism, his like ability to run the court, and I'm not talking about the fat days of the Celtics.
No, but the young
Lakers,
Shaq,
Lakers, the Magic, like his prime, the Heat. Heat. But like he didn't get credit for his technical skills. I feel like Derek Lewis is like the same way. He's just like just look at a guy and just stereotype like what he should be. Even though I'm supposed to be talking about Sergey Spivak, even though he goes for these techniques, I'm always like, oh God, it's not going to work one time because he's willing to give up his back to get a takedown. Like I think of, and this is going way back in the time machine, but remember when Remco Pardue was fighting?
Oh yeah.
And he'd get to the clinch and he'd do that like judo throw where they like just sweep out the arm where they actually give the guy his back, but they're holding the arm. Like he did against Orlando Wheat in UFC 2. And he's got his arm across. But like nowadays, guys would like throw a hook in and like slowly take their back. Like Spivak does that with like the headlock and the scarf and all that, where they kind of giving up their back and they're putting themselves in a dangerous position, kind of like we just saw Carlos Esparza doing like a Peterson, where she's got her arms behind, where she's kind of having her back to her opponent. I think it's not going to work for him one time. But the other thing about the lateral drop against Derek Lewis, like if he goes for that, you better make it all the way through, because if Derek Lewis falls on top of you, good luck.
The fight's over.
It's over. Besides being on top, his ground pound is legendary.
Yeah.
He's much safer route, and I expect this. He can shoot. He will shoot on the hips, and he also likes snatch singles, getting close and just snatch a single, run the pipe, or just turn the corner with it. That's the best bout. You don't want Derek Lewis on top of you. His ground pound has come a long way, and he really is a submission threat. So there's a really good chance, and here's my prediction. There's a really good chance Sergey Spivak takes down Derek Lewis and just submits him quick. Like I could see that happen, even though I'm saying how tough it is to hold Derek Lewis down, how hard it is to submit him. He's up there in age. You wonder about his motivation. It wouldn't shock me if he's taken down and submitted. And I expect him to take down Derek Lewis 2 or 3 times. Yeah. But I think I'm not ready to write off Derek Lewis completely. I think if the old Derek Lewis is still there and he's not shot, and I know I do this sometimes. I'm like the anti-Belichick, where Bill Belichick would rather be a year early than a year late on a player. Like he lets the guy go, and the Patriots fans go crazy, and then it finds out like, oh, yeah, Bill Belichick was right, like over and over again. I know I can kind of hold on. I mean, I picked Frank Yeager to win this weekend, so I'm hoping I'm wrong. Oh, sure. I'm hoping I'm right. I'm hoping Derek Lewis is still there. I'm hoping he finds a way back to his feet. And I think he does. And I think he has one last haymaking shot in him. And I think he's going to find it. And I say he doesn't. I think he's going to knock him out. I'm going to say Derek Lewis, late first round knockout.
And that is it for the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 218, Lewis versus Spivak, also known as UFC Vegas 68. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Schillen. If this is your first time watching one of the Schillen and Duffy previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We think we do our best to bring a mix of actual analysis and, predictions and picks, along with, the occasional historical aside goofiness. But please do like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. So if you have your own takes on some of these fights, you think our take is way off, you've got a crazy upset pick, like if you're picking Tatsuro Taira as a minus 1,100 favorite to shit the bed here, by all means, let us know, because we will shout you out to the heavens if you get that one right. But most importantly, join us on the recap right after the main event, usually about 15 minutes after. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page, where we will talk about all these fights in reverse order, starting from the main event all the way down to the first prelim. We will talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the winners as well as the losers. And the live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions and your comments in real time. And we have a growing, vibrant community of hardcore fans there that we would love you to join. It just so happens that Keith won't be on that one. He's normally the host of those, but since this card is supposed to end at the ass crack of dawn, I'll probably grab a replacement or just solo it and hang out with you guys for an hour or two. But yeah, we'd love to see you there. In the meantime, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.